Now, the other element to that is you have dissenting points of view, and I've noticed that decisions like no congregational voting at this point at Bromaz, which is where a lot of dissent happens. But where there is dissent, where people don't particularly care for the direction that the church is going or decisions are being made, how do your ministry teams kind of address that, communicate that, try to be in relationship with that person, even though they're kind of dissenting from where you want to go or where you feel called to go? That's really rubber hits the road.
Okay. Well, again, we try not to. I mean, we do have an annual meeting, which is legally required, by our church bylaws. But I think because of the ministry team format and the number of people that are involved, things tend to surface. Are going to surface a lot earlier than waiting to the end of the church year. Having said that, what we try to do, and what this is a relatively new practice that we're going to continue, is on a semester basis. We operate on the basis of semesters. On the semester basis, we have as a means of introducing what's coming next, what people can look forward to over over the course of the next semester. We've instituted basically a breakfast in which we talk about a number of issues to give people an opportunity, first of all, to be communicated with. Second of all, to give them an opportunity to raise questions. Okay. So in most cases, the questions are going to be about clarity of understanding as opposed to dissent. Okay. We have not, as far as I know, experienced any significant dissent in the last 2 to 3 years, because most of the people who were inclined to be dissenters have left. And it's not, out of their choice. We have not, there's been no one, and I want to be very clear about this, there's been no one we've asked to leave the church. Okay. I can't think of a time, maybe once in my nearly 30 years in the church, where that's actually been done. Right. So most of the people who are inclined to dissent over the direction of the church have left. Having said that,
you guys like that. Having said that,
you know what? I just know, even in saying that, I noticed that I said it twice. So, having said that, right?
So, like Paul and relative pronouns.
We do have a mechanism by which, if people wish to express dissent, disagreement, that has been communicated to the congregation. We try to do it annually. We're not always as faithful as we should be, or timely. That we communicate in writing, here are some biblical ways in which you can express disagreement or dissent. Okay. It always starts with who is the person with whom you have the disagreement, including if it's with the pastor or someone in leadership. Right. Start with that individual. Yep. And if it's something that's worthy of talking about, it's something worth talking to that individual about. And we try to start from that. Now, this is a I can't remember all of the steps, quite frankly, but it's a multi-step process. But the last process is, if you're still unhappy all of this, here is Newell Smith's telephone number and email address. Newell is our district superintendent. Gotcha. Okay. You're more than welcome, and we would encourage you, if you're not satisfied, you're more than welcome to contact him. And here's how you can reach him.
The only thing that I'd add is that, as Byron kind of alluded to, it's very much about not so much dissent these days, but making sure that we have adequate communication. It seems more and more as anybody who's running these kinds of large group things. Communication is always such a challenge, and we have to keep coming up with new ways, new vehicles, because one of the things that's even challenging for us is that you might have communicated in the ways that you thought were effective, and some people still aren't getting it. And you could have had a sign in front of their face for the last 3 months, but the day of the thing, they'll say, "I never knew about this." So
yeah, that never happens here.
That never happens. Never. No. So.
Yeah.
So we all struggle together with how to make communication effective in those kinds of realms, and recognizing somewhat from, you know, the idea of learning style. Some people are more auditory, more people are visual or something.
Right.
You have to find a different number of ways to say the same thing over and over again. And so that's really where our challenges are continuing to be. It's really not around dissent, it's around communication and making sure that everybody understands. But with that in mind, each ministry team is able to have that challenge on a more local level, so that there are issues that are brought up and we say, oh, you're having an issue with how the service is going. You see this particular pastor on that particular team, and bring your issue to that person. Don't keep thinking that by coming to Brian or even Byron that that's going to solve anything, because they'll just basically say, I have no idea. You'll have to go talk to that person anyway.
Right. Yeah. So. Now let me ask you, just to go back, because I know this congregation still is having problems with people who just like to dissent because they like to, and I'm sure a lot of folks that are watching this on YouTube, because you know we're all famous, are dealing with that. Back in before the last 2-3 years, when those issues came up, how kind of did you handle that? Because you obviously transitioned from it, and I think that's what a lot of people are interested in.
Right. Well, I think one of the there's a transition point in there somewhere, and I'll give you an example of someone who's no longer in the church. Obviously, I won't use names, but a situation that I was involved in, and it was a comment that Brian made during a Sunday sermon. And an individual didn't like something that he said. And it was his comment, Brian's comment was rather strong, but it was, I think, intentionally strong in order to make a point that needed to be made. Sure. Individual came up to me after the service and said, I didn't like what he said, and I think you need to go and talk to him about it. And my response was, I actually agreed with what he said, but since you didn't care for it, let you and I go over it together. And you can talk to him about it, and I'll be there with you. And he threw up his hands and turned around and walked away. And then several, you know, and I think what we have pushed very, very hard to, number one, to say that if we're going to be Christians, we cannot attack individuals by talking about them and to them to other people. So that there is a way that the Bible prescribes for addressing these kinds of issues, for addressing conflict, for addressing dissent, and that we are insistent that we're going to abide by them. Number two, we will not tolerate gossip. You'll get called on it. And if you insist on gossiping after you've been called on it, you may be called on it publicly.